The National Electrical Code, specifically Article 230, addresses service requirements. Section 230.75 focuses on accessibility and grouping of service equipment. Of particular relevance is 230.75c, which details the location of disconnecting means. For residential services rated at 200 amps or more, the service disconnecting means must be readily accessible. This disconnecting means must be installed at a readily accessible location. This location can be either outside of the building or structure. Alternatively, it can be inside the building or structure, but it must be nearest the point of entrance of the service conductors. A third option is to install the disconnecting means in a panel board located in accordance with Section 408.3. Section 408.3 pertains to the location of panel boards in dwelling units. Now let's delve further into the specifics of these requirements. The term readily accessible is crucial. It means capable of being reached quickly for operation, renewal, or inspections without requiring those to whom ready access is requisite to actions such as to use tools, to climb over or remove obstacles, or to resort to portable ladders, and so forth. So, the disconnecting means must be easily reachable without any special effort or equipment. Considering the outside location, this is fairly straightforward. The disconnect should be mounted in an accessible enclosure on the exterior of the building. When locating the disconnect inside near the point of entry, several factors come into play. The service conductors should enter the building at a point as close as practically possible to the location of the disconnect. This minimizes the length of unprotected conductors inside the building. These unprotected conductors are a potential hazard, as they are not protected by an overcurrent device until they reach the service disconnect. The NEC does not explicitly define the maximum allowable length of these service conductors. However, good practice dictates keeping them as short as possible. The intent is to minimize the risk of a fault occurring on these conductors before they reach the overcurrent protection. Now let's address the panel board option according to 408.3. Section 408.3 focuses on panel boards installed in dwelling units. It emphasizes accessibility and requires that panel boards not be located in bathrooms, clothes closets, or over steps. These locations are deemed unsuitable due to potential obstructions or environmental factors that could hinder access to the panel board. If the service disconnecting means is located within a panel board, that panel board must comply with these requirements. The panel board must be readily accessible and not located in any of the prohibited areas. Importantly, the NEC does not specify a minimum footage between the meter and the service disconnect. The primary concern is the accessibility and location of the disconnecting means, not the distance from the meter. The location requirements are designed to ensure that the service can be quickly and safely disconnected in case of an emergency. The commentary elaborates that the service disconnect for residential services of 200 amps or more must be readily accessible. It reiterates the allowable locations which are outside the building, inside near the point of entry, or in a panel board meeting the requirements of 408.3. To summarize, when dealing with residential services of 200 amps or more, the service disconnecting means must be readily accessible. Acceptable locations include outside the building, inside near the point of entry of the service conductors, or within a panel board that complies with Section 408.3. There is no specific requirement for a minimum distance between the meter and the service disconnect. The emphasis is on accessibility and minimizing the length of unprotected service conductors inside the building. In practical terms, this means carefully considering the layout of the building and the location of the service entrance when determining the optimal location for the service disconnect. The goal is to provide a safe and accessible means of disconnecting power to the building in case of an emergency or for maintenance purposes. Furthermore, it's important to understand the terminology used in the NEC. The service disconnecting means is the main switch or circuit breaker that can disconnect the entire electrical service from the building. This is typically located in the service panel or in a separate enclosure near the meter. The service conductors are the wires that run from the utility company's service drop or lateral to the service disconnecting means. These conductors are not protected by an overcurrent device until they reach the service disconnect. Therefore, it is crucial to minimize their length and protect them from physical damage. The point of entrance is the location where the service conductors enter the building. This could be through an exterior wall, underground conduit, or other approved method. The location of the point of entrance can influence the placement of the service disconnect, as it should be located as close as possible to this point. The NEC also addresses the ampacity of service conductors. The service conductors must have an ampacity sufficient to carry the calculated load of the building. This calculation is based on the size and type of the building, the appliances and equipment that will be used, and other factors. The NEC provides detailed guidelines for calculating the service load and determining the appropriate conductor size. It's important to consult these guidelines to ensure that the service conductors are adequately sized for the intended load. Another important consideration is grounding. The service must be properly grounded to provide a safe path for fault current. The grounding system typically consists of a grounding electrode conductor connected to a grounding electrode, such as a ground rod or a metal water pipe. The grounding electrode conductor must be sized according to the NEC and connected to the service equipment and the neutral conductor. Proper grounding is essential for protecting people and equipment from electrical shock and damage. In addition to the location and ampacity requirements, the NEC also addresses the type of equipment that can be used for the service disconnect. The service disconnect must be a suitable type for the application and must be listed by a recognized testing laboratory. Common types of service disconnects include circuit breakers and fuse switches. The service disconnect must be readily accessible and clearly marked to indicate its purpose. It's also important to ensure that the service equipment is properly installed and maintained. This includes inspecting the equipment regularly for signs of damage or wear and tear. Any damaged or defective equipment should be replaced immediately. Regular maintenance can help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure the safe and reliable operation of the electrical system. Furthermore, local codes and regulations may have additional requirements for service disconnects. It's important to check with the local electrical inspector to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes. The local electrical inspector can also provide guidance on specific installation requirements and answer any questions about the NEC. In summary, the NEC provides detailed requirements for the location, ampacity, grounding, and type of equipment used for service disconnect. These requirements are designed to ensure the safety and reliability of the electrical system. It's important to consult the NEC in local codes to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable requirements. When dealing with residential services of 200 amps or more, the service disconnecting means must be readily accessible. Acceptable locations include outside the building, inside near the point of entry of the service conductors, or within a panel board that complies with Section 408.3e. There is no specific requirement for a minimum distance between the meter and the service disconnect. The emphasis is on accessibility and minimizing the length of unprotected service conductors inside the building. Remember that electrical work can be dangerous, and it's always best to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. A qualified electrician can ensure that the installation is done safely and correctly and that it complies with all applicable codes and regulations. Electrical safety should always be the top priority when working with electrical systems. This discussion is for informational purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for professional electrical advice. Always consult with a qualified electrician for any electrical work. Moreover, changes to the NEC occur every 3 years, so it is vital to ensure that you are referencing the most current edition of the code. These updates can include revisions to existing articles or the addition of new articles that address emerging technologies or safety concerns. Staying informed about these changes is essential for electrical professionals to maintain compliance and ensure the safety of their work. To reiterate some key points, the phrase readily accessible is not just a suggestion, it is a mandate. It means that the service disconnect must be reachable without the need for tools, ladders, or the removal of obstacles. This accessibility is crucial in emergency situations where power needs to be shut off quickly. The allowance of placing the service disconnect inside the building near the point of entry is often a practical solution, especially in climates where outdoor installations are susceptible to weather-related damage or corrosion. However, it is essential to minimize the length of unprotected conductors inside the building. These conductors are a potential hazard because they are not protected by an overcurrent device until they reach the service disconnect. While the NEC does not specify a maximum length for these conductors, best practices dictate keeping them as short as possible to reduce the risk of a fault. Section 408.3e of the NEC provides specific requirements for the location of panel boards in dwelling units. These requirements are designed to ensure that panel boards are accessible and not located in hazardous or inconvenient locations. Panel boards should not be placed in bathrooms, closed closets, or over steps, as these locations can obstruct access or create safety hazards. The requirement for the service disconnect to be rated for at least the calculated load of the building is paramount. This calculation must take into account the size and type of the building, the appliances and equipment that will be used, and any other factors that may contribute to the electrical load. The NEC provides detailed guidelines for performing this calculation, and it is essential to follow these guidelines carefully to ensure that the service disconnect is adequately sized. Grounding is another critical aspect of electrical safety. The service must be properly grounded to provide a safe path for fault current and to protect people and equipment from electrical shock. The grounding system typically consists of a grounding electrode conductor connected to a grounding electrode, such as a ground rod or a metal water pipe. The grounding electrode conductor must be sized according to the NEC, and the grounding electrode must be installed in accordance with the code requirements. Regular inspections and maintenance of the electrical system are also essential for ensuring safety and reliability. The service equipment should be inspected regularly for signs of damage, wear, or corrosion. Any damaged or defective equipment should be replaced immediately. Regular maintenance can help to prevent electrical hazards and ensure that the electrical system operates safely and efficiently. Local codes and regulations may have additional requirements for service disconnects and other electrical equipment. It is important to check with the local electrical inspector to ensure that the installation complies with all applicable codes. The local electrical inspector can also provide guidance on specific installation requirements and answer any questions about the NEC. In addition to the technical requirements, it is also important to consider the aesthetic aspects of the service disconnect installation. The service equipment should be installed in a neat and workmanlike manner, and it should be located in a place where it will not be an eyesore. The service equipment should also be protected from physical damage, such as from vehicles or other objects. Remember, electrical work can be dangerous, and it is always best to consult with a qualified electrician if you have any questions or concerns. A qualified electrician can ensure that the installation is done safely and correctly and that it complies with all applicable codes and regulations. Electrical safety should always be the top priority when working with electrical systems.